Thank you so much for joining us today for our Lunch and Learn series. Our series today is all about starting strong, back to school strategies for dyslexia success. So, we're recording this in August, which is obviously back to school season, and we're wanting just to give you a few tangible, practical things to help you and your student feel confident. As I mentioned, this is part of our Lunch and Learn series from Dyslexia on Demand. We offer these every month, open to our parents as well as any of their friends or the community. We go into some deep dives into dyslexia therapy or dyslexia facets to where you can really deepen your understanding as you're supporting your child with dyslexia. It's a great time to build community with each other, continue to learn more. And in the marathon of therapy or navigating a dyslexia diagnosis, we consider these your rest stops and fueling stations to learn more. We have our calendar of topics. We've already covered a lot of these, which you can find on our YouTube site. We have a playlist for these where you can look through them, as well as several others that will be coming up in the coming months. And we hope you'll join us for those. If you're not familiar with us, Dyslexia on Demand offers one-on-one virtual dyslexia therapy to students all across the nation and even in other countries. It's all facilitated by a certified academic language therapist. We take a very data-driven approach, very highly individualized, to really make sure that every student reaches their full potential as a fluent reader. You can learn more about us on our website or also just contact us to talk more about your child's specific needs. Or if you're a current family, just keep on plugging with us and let us know how we can continue to support you. But we are glad you're here today to talk about the school year. This is something that we always ask ourselves in August is what do we want this school year to look like? Whether your child's going to kindergarten or whether they're going into college, every year kind of brings its ups and downs and changes. And that's true especially for a student with dyslexia when we're navigating these different academic concerns when they come up, as well as when they continue to present, when we're looking at what our child needs to really thrive in the academic environment and feel confident about themselves as a learner. So today, I want us to think about what we want it to look like. Oftentimes, we want it to look like this: our child very happy, very confident, they're growing in their skills, they have all of the supports in place they need to be successful, they're happy, and they're thriving in the classroom, they're thriving in life. We have to be intentional in order for this to happen. Or else sometimes what can happen is our student will present that struggle. We've all been here before where we've had a year of a kid with a lot of struggle, showing regression, isolation because they're not able to keep up with their peers, feeling frustrated, and just shutting down. So I hope the tips we cover today kind of keep you going towards this checkbox to where everyone in your house is feeling very supported and very hopeful about a great academic year to come. So this time of year, you're probably gathering the supplies, thinking about what your child needs. I know there's lots of school supply lists. You're looking to see who their teacher is. You're thinking about all of the school supplies and everything you need to get together. But today, I really want to urge you to think beyond the backpack. We're going to talk about some ways that we can reflect and assess in order to prepare for this year, reviewing our documentation and testing related to our students' needs, communicating proactively with the school about our student, also involving your child in the process and giving the important mindset medicine of the you can do it attitude to where they have everything they need to really self-direct themselves in class and know their value. We also want to talk a little bit about setting solid rhythms and routines so we can stay strong all year long and make this the best year ever for our kiddos. So the first part I want us to talk about is to reflect and assess. I put this up here. It says you can't know where you're going until you understand where you've been. I know that sounds a little bit like lyrics from a country music song, but it just rings so true, especially when you're thinking about the educational journey of a child. You really have to think about each year and think, what has been the progress made for that year? What went well, what didn't go well, so I can say, how do we need to navigate in the future? So I have a list of questions both for parents and kids. Both for parents, I first want you to think back to last year and think, did my child make meaningful progress last year? Sometimes that answer is yes. Sometimes that answer is no. But we have to ask that in order to see if what happened last year actually made any difference in moving the needle. And just really thinking about, okay, if they did make progress, why was it? What was in place? Who was in place? So we can make sure those things are in place again this year. Also ask yourself, What were the peaks and valleys of last year? Sometimes we like to think about this as the good and the bad. I like to say the peaks and the valleys. The peaks meaning the things that were the high points, the valleys that were the low points. Because this year we want to climb out of those valleys and try to make it a level playing field or climb up to the peaks in every area. So feel free to list that out as, and these were some great things that happened last year. They won this award. They finished their dyslexia program. But here were some valleys. Maybe they didn't pass their state testing. Maybe that they just always had so much homework and they were so frustrated. Just put those things down on paper or just note them to be intentional, and that will really help you think, well, what is it this year? Are we making progress? Are we getting better, more peaks and less valleys? Or how do we kind of just work on that? Next is a personal question, a personnel question, I should say. But who are their biggest supporters? Oftentimes, the teacher is going to change from year to year for a student. You're not really going to have the same teacher 2 years in a row. That teacher spent a lot of time getting to know you and your student the year before. And you want to make sure that that's communicated to the future teacher. And sometimes there's other people on campus who are supporting your student. So ask who those people were so that maybe you can make sure to gather their thoughts as well and make sure that those people might be in place to help your child if that's possible. Also, I want you to ask yourself what was most helpful to my child and to me. That can kind of help you understand how to operate through this school year. Maybe it was having dedicated time to reflect on school, having dedicated time for homework. Maybe it was having a weekly check-in with the teacher or a monthly check-in with the teacher. Maybe for your student, it was having quiet time around school or having a specific friend with them in school. Just think about those things. And then also what felt sustainable and what didn't. School moves at such a fast pace for kids, and I think it's important to think about also your rhythms in life and how that can affect the school day. So just thinking through the things that this is something that we can continue on into this year because it is helpful, or we need to kind of leave that in last year because it really didn't help. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't productive for us. So these are some questions that you can ask as a parent when you're reflecting and assessing on how things went last year as you're preparing for this year. But what about your kiddos? This is a great time to involve them. They're already thinking about school. I know my children just today found out who their school year teachers are. So they're going around the neighborhood, chit-chatting with everyone, finding out who's in class with them. All the buzz is out there about school, and their little brains, whether they're elementary age or high school, they're starting to think about school in many ways. Sometimes it's a nervous ways, sometimes it's an excited ways, but it's important that you kind of understand how they're thinking about school and have them reflect on last school year as they're thinking towards the year ahead. So these are some great questions to ask, even while you're just driving around town. But what felt hard at school last year? They may name a specific subject. They may be like, oh, that animal project that I had to write that long essay and build that was really hard. That's going to help you understand where the hard things are going to be this year and know that they interpreted those as hard. It's also important, though, to ask them what helped you feel successful. And I think that's important because our students sometimes forget they can feel successful. And so when you're going through that, you can say, what was something that you achieved last year? What led to your success on that? Maybe it is some kind of like science fair project. I felt successful because I was able to do something with my hands and build it. Or I felt successful when I was able to study in this way and do well on my spelling test. And then this is a great one to think about. What is one thing that you wish your teacher had known last year before you started school with them? And those are the things that then you can communicate to this year's teacher, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But oftentimes it takes a while for a student and teacher to really get in the groove, get to know each other personally, get to know each other academically. And so just thinking from the student's perspective, from your child's perspective, saying, I just wish they knew this about me. It can even be that I'm really good at building Legos, just to where they have something to connect with their teacher on. The next thing that you're going to want to do is also review any documentation such as IEPs and 504 plans. Likelihood is if you have a child with dyslexia, ADHD, you probably have some form of meeting and documentation and paperwork that you've already gone through that includes accommodations and services. So pull that out, dust it off. They're usually good for several years. And so you may not be represented with it, but go ahead and pull it out and review it. And it matters because this is actually supposed to be a shared document that follows your child through the school year so that they have access to everything that they need that you've agreed upon at a team meeting. But the beginning of the year is very busy. As a former educator myself and former classroom teacher, I can tell you the first week that you're back before kids start, there's so much in service and trainings and all these things. There's very little time sometimes to actually know much about your students. And you're kind of just thrown in the first day and kind of get to know them. So your teacher may not have read your child's plan yet, and it might be a while until that's there. It's also a very thick document. So sometimes it's nice for you to go in and kind of provide the Cliff's Notes version if you're familiar with that reference, or just a small little summary of like, hey, these are some things in my child's document. Don't ever assume that it's just going to be implemented. Yes, it needs to be implemented, but don't assume that it is. Be that bridge between that documentation and the delivery. That classroom teacher is the one that's going to make sure that's delivered to the student, but you really want to make sure that you're communicating what's in that document. So make sure you review this before the first day of school and especially practice the accommodations such as assistive technology or anything mentioned in there with your students so they remember what's available to them. They remember how to use it so they don't sneak up on it when they've had their first big writing assignment and forget what text to speech is or speech to text is to where they're able to really go ahead and just utilize that from the get-go. When you're looking through that documentation, again, pull out the highlighters, pull out the sticky notes, read through it. Kids grow, kids change. Likewise, grades change. Work comes more complex, work becomes more voluminous. So you want to look and say, are these accommodations still appropriate and sufficient now that my child is in this grade, even though it was written in this grade? Maybe there's some you need to add. Maybe there's some you need to take away that really aren't needed anymore. But think about it through that lens. You also want to look at services. If your child has dyslexia or if they're being pulled for special intervention, you want to make sure that that's going to be continued to be delivered and that it's delivered in the way that it was written in the document to where it's following all of those promises that you made around that IEP table. And then also just look through it and say, does this really include my child's current needs? Again, kids grow, they grow into things, they grow out of things. Think about your child and where they are right now and say, is this still relevant? Is there something missing? Is there something more that we need to put in here? If so, that's fine. You need to just arrange a meeting to update that and then also just make sure the teacher's aware of that. If your child's old enough, I would highly, highly recommend that you review this with your child. They don't have to be there for all 25 pages and you annotating, but maybe say, hey, I went over your IEP today. You know what that is? That's something that's individualized just for you that's going to help you have a successful year. And here's some things I noticed. I want to talk to them to these about you and put it in their language no matter what age they are. Even with little bitties, even in second grade, like if they have anxiety or if they need extra time, you can say, you know how sometimes it feels like you're rushed a lot? If you feel that way in school, you actually get extra time. You can have help with that. So just putting it in the language that they need. And on the flip side of that, if they're an older kid, start having them go through the process of highlighting and note taking with you, making sure that they know exactly what's in there, how to interpret that, because as they're going off to college, they're in the driver's seat there. So you really want to start handing that process over. This next one is such a biggie, and it's to communicate proactively. Oftentimes, the first time we meet our child's teacher is at a very busy meet the teacher night. I know ours is on a Friday morning. It's from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. All of my kids, they have 24 kids in their class. They're in and out talking to each other, comparing notes, who's in what's class. The teacher's just trying to say, you're this person, trying to introduce themselves to everyone in the room. There is not time to talk about these specific needs. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have the conversation, though. Definitely take advantage of the gift of email and send an email to build connection, context, and community. You can include your child's teacher from this year, maybe even their one from last year, as well as any support people on that email, just to give that team approach from the beginning. And I think that speaks volumes when you say, I'm here to partner with you. I'm not here to attack you. I'm not here to monitor you. We're partnering together. So email your child's teacher before the first day of school. And that message does not have to be super long. It can just be introducing yourself, introducing your child, saying, hey, my child has dyslexia and dysgraphia. So they have challenges with this, and this in school. They have accommodations for this, and this that help them. But they're also really strong at engineering, or they love math, or they are like the best baseball player you've ever seen. Make sure that you're just communicating that 360 about your child. You can even make it into a fun little one pager. I love just going to Canva and downloading some of their free templates and editing them. This is an example of one that's on there that's just a sample one pager you can send to all of your students' teachers at once saying, hi, my name's Brandy Blaylock. I'm John Doe's mom. I wanted to include some information about him. I'm putting it right here. And so this would just kind of talk about how I learned best. You can notice very easy bullet points. This is way easier than that whole 504 IEP document. Top 3 accommodations, your information right there. Strengths and things I love, so they know kind of how to fill their bucket. And fears and things to avoid. Things like being called to read aloud, or being timed on tests, or having really loud assignments, or anything like that. There's all kinds of things that you could list there. But you can send this one document to all the teachers and say, I just wanted you guys to know a little bit more about John and his needs. Thank you so much. I'm here to partner with you this year. And if you want to, you can even have your child say, I'm sending this with my child. I want them just to introduce themselves using this. So they get used to talking about these things, which are really important for advocacy. I also suggest if you do this form, as far as like making a one-page thing or something that kind of has that, give it a school home. Typically, there's a homework folder or a binder, or put it in a page protector, keep it in their locker. It's just really helpful to where if they ever do need to kind of revisit that with their teacher, they can, or if they have a substitute, or also just a reminder for our kids is what they need, because it'll be like, oh yeah, this is what I need to learn best. I'm struggling right now. What can I do? What are some of my accommodations? Like, what are my strengths? Like, everything's on this page with a cute little picture of them. So sometimes just having something tangible, even for your kid, can really help. And again, just like I said, having your child present that, involving your child is so important, especially as the students get older, and that independent advocacy is important. So encourage your older students, instead of you emailing the teacher, have them email the teacher and introduce themselves. Show that they're in charge of their learning profile. Have them explain their learning needs in their own words. They can just say, sometimes I get really overwhelmed when I have a lot of assignments. It helps me if I have more instructions to break it down, or small deadlines. And have them ask a question that makes them sound collaborative, makes it to where I think a lot of times kids feel like if they have to ask for something, it's like, oh, they're having to have pity on me. And that's not it. They're just getting what they need. So ask, how can we work best together this year? So that can be included as in, when is a good time for tutoring hours, or what can I do to prepare for your class? Any of that. But building those advocacy and agency skills now is going to pay off dividends in the future when they're going to college and have to do it on their own. Very important part of just development in general is just making sure our children have the appropriate mindset. So I like to remind parents to give the mindset medicine as much as they can, as frequent as they can, in the heaviest doses they can. With dyslexia specifically, it's important to really reframe that for them, instead of saying, oh, you have dyslexia, and making it very secretive. Just say, you have dyslexia. It's a difference that may cause some challenges in reading, writing, and spelling, but it's just a difference. It's not a deficit. There's help for that. And there's many other things that you're very good at. And so you can make a strengths map with your child to reference. Again, that's a good tangible to put in the binder, such as in putting their picture in the middle and lots of little bubbles and pictures of the things that they're really good at, like being a good friend, being a good listener, being able to solve complex problems, anything that way. And then also just teaching them positive self-talk, so that when they get in those moments when it's really difficult, they already have the narrative right there to say, I'm doing really good. I'm really good at this. Praise them for effort over outcomes. Like, I can really see you tried hard on that assignment. I'm really proud of you. And making their difference distinct, but not less than. So say, this is something special about you. Load up on the notes of affirmation. Lunchbox notes are not a thing of the past. It's great to still just slip a little note or keep a little journal with your kid that if they're having a down day at school or they need that reminder because that positive self-talk is not actually self-talk for them yet, they can still get your words while they're at school. Opening up a little journal saying, you're going to do great. You're very capable. You're very kind. You're a great student. All of those affirmations that sometimes they need to hear to give them the fuel through their day. So teaching those advocacy skills is really critical, but really the best way to do that is through some role play scenarios. Like pretend you're doing assignments and have them say, "Can I use what accommodation?" Have them select for this assignment, or saying, "I need this to be successful." Especially when they're doing homework in the beginning and you're like, "Oh, this is so frustrating." Okay, what accommodation can we use in order to help this? Maybe we are going to take more frequent breaks. Maybe we're going to turn on the audio so we can listen, anything like that. It's also important that you help your student embrace that intervention pull out. A lot of times, in order to really help with dyslexia, dysgraphia, any kind of learning difference, there is a special program or remediation that they have in a separate space than their mainstream classroom. Some students can be very embarrassed about that or very timid to go, but I think it's important for them to know this is something that helps me and that's why I'm going there. So reminding your student why they're doing that, when they're doing that, how often they're doing that. So it's already predictable and they know that it's for good, that it's not for punishment. So, we say this all the time in sports, right? We always want our kids to practice how they play. You got to wear the cleats if you're going to go on the soccer field. You got to take the bat and the batting helmet if you're on the baseball field. And that's true in the classroom as well. We want them to practice how they're going to perform in the classroom. So practicing those scenarios with what accommodations, what can we do to make this better? How does your brain work in this situation? Making sure they have that input. Next is just to set some solid rhythms and routines in your home life, especially with school. School involves so many transitions, starting from waking up in the morning. We have the summertime to the school year transition, right? Where our kids are staying up later, sleeping later, have lots of these random camps and very much free and structured time. To now, it's at a very abrupt start of a 6 a.m. wake up, getting dressed, eating your breakfast, and out the door all within 45 minutes, which can be very quick. And kids with dyslexia, many of them also have ADHD. They can struggle with a lot of that executive functioning piece, especially with transitions and planning. So starting the day off even in the morning can be tricky. And then we get to school and it's like, now we do English and then we do math and then we go to PE and then we go to the library and then we go to recess and then we go to lunch. And it's just this constant flux of transition. So having some solid rhythms and routines and creating structure will help reduce that anxiety and boost the follow through on assignments. So reviewing your students' schedule with them can be very beneficial. Usually teachers do this all the time and keep that posted on the board for a reason, but then thinking about the schedule throughout the entire day and the entire week is helpful. So there's really some points that I would encourage you to build in some solid rhythms and routines that are very concrete, very visual, very easy for students to implement. One is a morning routine. Morning to get to school, there is a start time, and if you're not there on time, you're tardy. So you really want to try to work on building a very positive morning routine so your child has a calm start to their day, but they're still there on time. After school, I think is honestly one of the hardest transitions for kids. It seems like they would come home and just be so happy to be home and want to talk about their day. That's not my experience, probably not yours either. A lot of times there's some restraint collapse from the fact that kids have been having to sit still all day. They're very brain tired and they come home and those emotions are pouring out. So thinking about what decompression time can look like and then moving into the after school routines of such as like homework blocks and more productive blocks. So I wanted to give you just a few examples. These two on the left are more for little kids. They're very visual. I also want you to think about the fact that a student with dyslexia, don't give them something that's just full of words to read and expect for that to feel like it's going to create calm and structure. That can actually be counterintuitive and counterproductive just because now they're having to access the language on those and try to interpret it and then put it into action. So visuals are great for this. So for example, in before morning, there's all of these different things that like this kid would need to do, like from making their bed to ready to school. You can leave some optional for your kids. I know there are some mornings like make my bed. That's not going to happen today. Like we're up later. Let's just make sure that we get our breakfast, brush our teeth, brush our hair, and get some clothes on and get out the door with our backpack. So even just having like, okay, we're not going to worry about this today, but I want you to do the rest. And then after school, a lot of these are very actionable tasks. Again, first think about when that afternoon is really going to start. Maybe you just say, you're going to come home and we're just going to kind of have some quiet time. You can have a snack, you can play outside, you can play upstairs in your room for some quiet time for like 30 minutes. And then we'll get to unpacking all the school stuff and doing all the different things. And this is also really great to have like on a calendar that's written up, like if for kids that have sports, like knowing which day they're going to have sports. If you have an older kid, most kids have some kind of device with a timer on it. If not, I would encourage you to find something, whether it be an old watch or iPhone or just setting timers on the stove, whatever you need to do. But the thing that I love about having some kind of digital device with an alarm clock is that you can often then say the time and then label it. And this can be super helpful for it. It's like, okay, you have to go to baseball practice at 6:30. So at 6 o'clock, change into your baseball stuff. And that alarm goes off at 6 o'clock. So we start getting into that mode. So this can be really helpful for homework if you know, like, okay, you're going to start your homework at 5 o'clock. And so therefore at 4:50, it sends you an alarm starting homework in 10 minutes. And at 5 o'clock, it gives that time to start your homework. And it can even have a timer of when it's going to finish. But that gives that auditory input, visual input, and those are often on repeat. So you don't even have to input it much. So I would encourage you to seek those out. There's all kinds of ways you can do different timers for that. But really, this was all just kind of some very basic tips to get started for the year, but it is a year long. The school year goes on for a while, new developments occur. So stay strong all year long. Don't wait for a crisis to communicate. Keep that proactive communication there. Think about what you need for communication frequency to feel like you're plugged into what your child's needs are. It's okay to send an email saying, I'm just checking in to see how things are going. Or I saw this assignment and I noticed, or we were working on this project and she was really struggling. Could you provide some insights on your end or some things that you're doing to help her? So don't wait for that crisis, but lead with connection and curiosity, saying, I'm wondering if she needs this. I think a lot of times parents don't want to email teachers because they're kind of looked at as that parent, as in the attacking parent, but it's not. It's really just your way of supporting your child at home because you're not in the classroom all day with them, able to see those things. Don't be afraid to ask for the conferences and meetings. It's a good way just to kind of stay up to date on things, especially if you kind of plan it and say, this, I'd like to plan a meeting or plan a conference to talk about X, Y, Z, to where it's like you're kind of leading the conversation and you're not making the teacher kind of pull everything up. But that way you can kind of figure out what's going on. And then pivot when necessary. Maybe there's a placement that your child's in, they decided to take honors math and it's just not working out. Try to pivot, see if you can go down to regular math. Also, whenever something is just coming up and maybe there's a change, just make sure that you're able to pivot and explain that to your child. But overall, just continue to be your child's best advocate. That's the whole reason you're watching this virtual webinar, anyhow. And then you can always reach out to us. Our current families, we offer tons of support, especially when explaining like what we do with dyslexia therapy and how that can relate to your child's needs, as well as just continued IEP involvement. We're going to talk about that next month. But we're always happy to kind of give you some input about what success looks like for a dyslexic student in school. But I wanted to go ahead and put up some upcoming events. If you're here, you obviously like to learn. We have two great opportunities, both for you and for your kid. The first one is for your child. On September 15th, we are having a Dyslexia Mindset Matters webinar. This is going to be led by Megan Buchanan. She is the founder of Grit. She is also an aerospace engineer. She is dyslexic, and she does these crazy excursions all across the world of climbing Everest and such. She's actually on the Netflix show Outlast. She's very motivational, very enthusiastic. So she's going to be talking to the kids at this one. It's at 6:30. Don't worry, if you have something, you can register and then get a recording to watch within the next 14 days. We're very excited about this. It's our first one to really do one for the kids. So we hope that you'll join us. And of course, you can watch too. And then this next one is a lunch and learn. Our next one is next month on Friday, September 12th. And it's about the ABCs of the IEPs. So individualized education plans we know can be very tricky to initiate, to navigate, to implement, and getting the right goals set. We're just going to kind of guide you through that process so you kind of know what to expect. with regards to dyslexia. So that will be a little bit more focused on that, but just so you can understand kind of those dynamics. But we are so grateful that you joined us today. If you have any questions, you're more than welcome to drop it below in the comment section and we'll respond back to you. But thank you so much for your attendance and interest, and we wish you the best this school year. We hope you have an amazing time.